I just kind of decided I'm probably going to look at YouTube movies because they have a bunch of free to watch and it's YouTube, so I can just pull it right up and look at the scene in advance. Anyways, hey, welcome to the podcast. And you're wondering what the podcast name is. And truthfully, this is recorded before I came up with the name on the last one. I still haven't finished that one. It's still being put together, edited. But anyways, the episode name is Moonstruck. I don't have a clever title for it, so we're just going to talk about the film Moonstruck, which is on YouTube Movies, which...
I just kind of decided I'm probably going to look at YouTube movies.
So here we are. And now, welcome to the podcast. That's my little theme song in progress. Hope you liked it. Okay, let's just say this is an Oscar winner, and you probably heard of this song, but it goes, when the moon hits your eyes like a big pizza pie, that's the moray. It's a pretty catchy song, all things considered, despite my butchering of the lyrics. And, you know, it's something you would put on your playlist for date night. I would too. I would put this movie on during date night because it is very romantic without being wishy-washy, which just appeals to me more because I'm not really the type of guy to watch romance-heavy movies. I'm not going to sit down to watch The English Patient anytime soon. But this movie does it in a way that works. It's very curt with its words, with its dialogue, and it leans heavily into the Italian-American heritage of the main character and her family. And Italian is a romance language, so you can tell how they set the stage. Speaking of setting the stage, let me introduce the plot to you. A boy meets a girl, and they fall in love. Oversimplified, yes, but that's only if you're excluding a couple details, like the fact that the main character, Loretta, played by Cher, is falling in love with her fiancé's brother, who is estranged, and so she goes to invite him to the wedding, but then she sees that he's hot, and he's Nicolas Cage. And so, strange things are afoot. And you could say she was moonstruck. But seriously, during all the romance scenes in this movie, you will usually find the appearance of a full moon, and that works somewhat with the title and the themes that the movie wants to lay grounds on, and we'll talk about that. So you remember that part where I said Nick Cage is in this movie? Well, he is, and you could say he's a national treasure, but I don't have much to say about him outside this movie. It's certainly the best Nicolas Cage movie I've ever seen. Mandy is pretty good, and I'm sure there's some other good Cage movies that people like for the wrong reasons, but I like this one for the right reasons. His acting is very, very good, and the freak out he has, because that's a staple in Nick Cage's career, he has these freak outs.
Bring me the big knife.
No, Ronnie.
Bring me the big knife. I'm gonna cut my throat.
His freak out here is not earned because that's not the point of his character. He's whining. He's a whiny guy. That's his natural, that's his daily life before meeting Loretta, the love interest in this movie. It shows off that he's a broken man who needs a little loving in his life. And who better to provide that than Loretta, played by Cher of all people. And when she took this role in 1989 or whenever, she was in her 40s. Not that it really matters, but it kind of does because her role playing as Loretta, her character is in her 30s. She's past the age of marrying traditionally, and she's got a couple gray hairs. She's bitter and moot about the fact that people pick on her for this very situation, her family. But she is drop dead gorgeous. I don't know if it's the magic of Hollywood or good looks naturally, or maybe just having a lot of money, or a combination. Either way, the leads are perfectly cast, in my opinion. Now, when I talk about movies, where I talk about them in a review format, I usually leave out the small stuff. I highlight the good and the bad, the plot points, the characters, because usually you're there to see the main character. You're there to see Arnold Schwarzenegger or Claude Van Damme, Val Kilmer. And I know that these celebrities are getting less famous. They're going into D-list, but, bear with me. As the talent shrinks, and not that, A-list celebrity is better than a D-list celebrity, but that might be the case in terms of acting ability. The point is, as you take away from the effort put into the main characters, which some movies do, sometimes they focus solely on the soundtrack because it's a musical and that's the most important part, or they focus on the action because nobody's there to get in-depth plot for a kung fu fighting movie. You have to balance out your content. And so Moonstruck is one of those movies that decides to flesh out the neighborhood while it keeps the gags running. It's not too in-depth because most of the characters are there to crack a joke. But in a few instances, the movie focuses on the underlying themes of romance and shows us different people from different walks of life discussing love and what it means to them. All these side characters are supporting the narrative, and of course that's what they're supposed to do by design, but regardless, it's endearing, and it fills out a lot more of the world than what was probably necessary for a generic rom-com. And what it turned into was a film with style and therefore identity. As I said before, the film leans heavily on Italian culture, and that is not only including the food, the music, and the people, but the values instilled in them. Even though I couldn't tell you what they were doing there or what their importance is to one of the main characters, I can tell you they felt like real people, and whenever they interacted with or helped one of the characters in need, it felt real. I could feel love in a different type of form, respect, and community. The point is, we're not entirely focused on just one couple. We're exploring themes of love, and Loretta values the advice of her elders. She's also Catholic, so she goes to confession in the movie. Catholicism isn't the only magic out there in this movie. And maybe I shouldn't call it magic. Catholicism, I mean. But the point is, there are other forces of nature at work, and the way it manifests itself is in the moon, the full moon. You usually see that in horror movies. Werewolves. To use transformation as a idea. The moon makes people crazy, But in this movie, they use it for romantic purposes, and they treat the moon as if it were an aphrodisiac. And the message that the writer or director wanted to get across was that love is a passionate, messy ordeal. It drives people crazy in love. But at some points in the movie, it gets very existential. And that's also because in this movie, death is a common fear. There's a funeral in the movie. Loretta does taxes for the funeral home director, and her father cheats on her mother because he is afraid to die. All these emotions and the lust underneath it, implied by it, drives us to do crazy things. And the moon is just one way of showing that, literally.
Do you love him, Loretta?
No.
Good. When you love them, they drive you crazy, because they know they can.
This film has a plethora of good one-liners. It would be a shame not to throw this into the podcast, but I can't list them all. They can't all go in. So let's just say that if you find yourself laughing at the same film, at the same comedy film for over a decade after having seen it or after it had come out, that's a good comedy movie. It's something to remember. I've watched this movie quite a lot. I grew up on it. Whenever I saw Moonstruck, I would always have spaghetti for dinner. Because you just kind of have to get into the mood. And actually, whenever we do have spaghetti, although it's not every time, my mom would, she would play the song. She would play the theme song of Moonstruck, which I so eloquently sang. So just like my mom showed it to me, you should show it to someone else who you like.
That's the game!
So I have 2 rating systems because I recently joined Letterboxd, and I've been using that to log my movies ever since. So if you want to go follow me on there, I'll tell you right now. Sorry, loading. Okay, it's Monty, not Python. Monty, not Python. Combine it all together. You'll find me. You'll at least get a good idea of all the movies that I've rated. And that is on the 5-point scale. But I am most comfortable with out of 10 because it just feels more accurate. So I would say an 8.5 out of 10 for Moonstruck. Maybe a 9. Maybe a 9. But, you know, you're really rating based on your enjoyment. And when I think of an 85, an 8.5, you know, I guess it's not too outlandish to say that I treat movie ratings as I treat grades, as in if it's below 50%, I basically think you failed. You know, ratings are a little tough, and sometimes they're not honest. And by honest, I mean they're not updated with my current thinking. But anyways, we're talking about good movies. So this is an 8.5 out of 10, and I would strongly recommend it. It's, you know, perfect for date night, perfect for sitting down with a girlfriend, and it's funny as hell, I gotta say. I don't really know what to say about the comedy that I wouldn't just be giving away. Yeah, honestly, you just watch the whole hour and 40-something minutes of this movie, you'll get all the jokes, you'll have a better time than if I tried to explain it, because then it's just not going to be funny. It's hard for me to talk about any of the flaws because I can't point out a single glaring one. If it's anything, it's just small mistakes here and there, lines that I would have liked read in a different cadence of tone, you know, petty shit. So there's that. And I'll hopefully have more to say on the subject of romance movies, because I don't think all of them are bad. I don't think all of them are not suited to my tastes. I enjoy that too. It's got a little charm to it. So stay tuned for more of that. I'm sure you have your own opinion that differs from me in some ways. And if you don't know what movie I talk about, maybe my directions could mislead you. But you're here by choice, but just know, question authority. I hope you have a good evening or a good day. And if I were to recommend one movie that's similar to this, watch Hopscotch, 1981. I'll talk about that someday. But for now, just watch it. Stay tuned. I'll have the rest coming your way.